There are two types of people: those who check their bank statements and those who trust. For 10 years, I was the first type at work, and for 6 years, I was the second at home. Guess which type costs more? My name is Rachel. I'm 35, I'm a financial analyst at an investment firm, and I can find a hidden million in corporate filings in 20 minutes. They pay me very good money for that. Ironic, right? A woman who professionally finds what people hide in numbers spent 6 years not noticing what was happening in her own bank account. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning. Connor, my husband. If I had to describe him in one sentence 6 months ago, I would have said, creative, gentle, a little out of touch with the real world, and that's exactly why we worked. I was numbers, charts, deadlines. He was colors, fonts, inspiration. I earned roughly 3 times more, and it was never a problem, or so I thought. He freelanced from home, took projects when he wanted, picked up Ethan from daycare at 3, made dinner. Our 4-year-old son adored him. So did I, and then March came, and I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I looked at our joint account. Not the way I usually did, balance looks fine, okay, move on. I really looked. The way I look at work. Line by line. It happened by accident. At the office, I was putting together a presentation for a client and needed an example of a household budget, anonymized, just for illustration. I opened our account to use the expense structure as a template, and my brain, trained over 10 years to spot anomalies, kicked in automatically. The spending over the past 14 months didn't add up. Not catastrophically. Not like the balance was negative or something was missing. Subtler, neater. The monthly cash withdrawals had increased by $400 to $500, gradually, without sudden jumps. If I didn't know how to read trends, I never would have noticed. Someone had done this smartly, incrementally, like a person who knows they might be watched. Back then, I didn't know that someone was my husband. Back then, I just thought, strange, I should look into this. A purely professional reflex. A purely professional reflex that destroyed my life, or saved it. I still haven't decided. That night, I slept fine. This is an important detail, because later I stopped sleeping for several weeks, and that's when I appreciated that last peaceful night. But at the time, I simply closed the banking app, lay down next to Connor, who was already asleep facing away from me, and drifted off. Because an anomaly in the data isn't a conclusion, it's a signal, and I don't draw conclusions without a full analysis. The next morning, I arrived at the office 40 minutes earlier than usual, closed the door, opened a new Excel file, named it Cone Household Review Neutral in case someone saw my screen, though who would see it? I have my own office. But habit says, data first, emotions later. Structure saves you. I downloaded the full transaction history of our joint account for 18 months. Not 14, I widened the window to see when the shift had started. And I began doing what they pay me $180,000 a year to do. Every transaction into a category. Groceries, gas, utilities, everything for Ethan, subscriptions, cash withdrawals, dining out, every single one. Over 700 rows. It took me 2 hours and 4 coffees. First, I saw the cash curve. Before last May, Connor withdrew cash 2 or 3 times a month, $100 to $200. Normal. Starting in May, every week, consistently, 150. The monthly difference, about 500. Over 14 months, 7,000. Not the kind of money you'd notice in your balance, but the kind of money you'd notice in a trend. Then I saw the Uber rides. Every Tuesday and Thursday, between 11 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, when Ethan was at daycare, a trip to the Maple Ridge neighborhood. There and back. 42 rides over the past 7 months. Maple Ridge was across town. We didn't know anyone there. There was no place Connor could be working. I highlighted the cells yellow. At work, yellow means needs attention. Red means confirmed problem. I was still in the yellow zone, for now. Then I found the subscription. $9.99 a month, billed as some vague DM premium services. Active for 14 months. I Googled it. It was the paid version of Date Match. The yellow zone was over. I remember sitting in front of the screen staring at that $9.99, not at the $7,000 in cash, not at the Uber rides to nowhere. At $9.99, because cash can be explained. Uber can be explained. But a subscription to a dating app in an active marriage cannot be explained. I closed Excel, opened it again, closed it, opened it, and then I did what I always do when data tells me something I don't want to hear. I went looking for more data. I opened Google Calendar, not his, mine. My work calendar synced with the family one. The one Connor had access to because it's easier to plan who picks up Ethan that way. And I started overlaying. Uber to Maple Ridge, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I checked my own schedule for those same weeks. Tuesday was my regular meetings with portfolio managers, 10 to 2. Thursday was my analytics block. I was always in the office until at least 6. These were my most predictable days. Connor knew that, had known it for all 6 years. Cash withdrawals. I sorted by date and compared them to his freelance payments. The pattern: a client payment comes in, a day or two later, a withdrawal. Small, proportional, not greedy. As though he was paying himself a percentage on every project. My brain automatically calculated. Roughly 15% of every fee went to cash. The Date Match subscription, activated on May 12th of last year. I checked my planner. May 12th was the day I was officially offered the senior analyst position. I remember that evening. We drank champagne. Connor said he was proud of me, that I deserved it, that he always knew. A week after that evening, he registered on a dating site. I sat in my office, staring at the spreadsheet, and for the first time in this entire analysis, I felt not professional interest, but something physical, like someone was slowly squeezing my ribs. Because it's one thing to see that your husband is spending money on something unexplained. It's another to see that his every action was tied to your schedule, that he knew when you were in a meeting, when you'd be working late, when you definitely wouldn't call. This wasn't an impulse, not it just happened. This was engineering. He had designed his second life around my first. Like a parasite that adapts to its host's cycles. Sorry for the metaphor, but I'm an analyst, not a poet. I saved the file, made a copy to my personal email. And then, only then, I allowed myself 10 minutes in the bathroom. Closed the stall door. Didn't cry. Just stood there breathing, pressing my forehead against the cold wall. 10 minutes. Then I washed my face, went back to my desk, and started the next phase. Because I had enough data for a hypothesis, but not enough for a conclusion. And I never present a conclusion without the full picture. Never. 3 days I did nothing. Went to work, picked up Ethan when it was my turn, made dinner when it was my turn, lay down next to Connor and listened to him breathe. Steady, calm, a man with a clean conscience. Or a man who'd been living a double life so long that both had become normal. 3 days I gathered my nerve. Actually, no, wrong expression. I wasn't gathering my nerve. I was waiting for the right moment. Those are different things. On Saturday, Connor put Ethan to bed and said he'd take a shower. I heard the water running. I had about 15 minutes. His iPad was on the kitchen table, charging, face down as always. For 6 years he'd placed it face down, and for 6 years I thought it was just a habit. Maybe it was a habit, but now I knew why it had started. The unlock code was Ethan's birthday. Connor hadn't changed it since Ethan was born. I thought about that and almost stopped. The password, our son's birthday. on a device he was using for what? I didn't stop. Email. Connor had two email apps on the iPad. The default one, his work email, which I'd seen 100 times, and Gmail, which I'd never opened because why would I? Everyone has a personal email. I opened the Gmail. The account name wasn't Connor Davis. It was some C. Donovan, first initial and an unfamiliar last name. His mother's maiden name, the one nobody knew, thought out, careful like everything else. In the inbox, notifications from date match. Dozens. I didn't open each one, I didn't have time. I was looking for conversations. I found them. Not one woman, four, over 14 months. Two exchanges had fizzled out almost immediately. Another one lasted a couple of weeks before going quiet. But the last one, someone named Vanessa, was an 8-month stream of messages. Continuous, unbroken. I didn't read the content, not then. I photographed the screen methodically, screenshot after screenshot. Names, dates, frequency of messages, data, only data, and then I found Zillow. In the Safari bookmarks, 4 saved listings. All one-bedroom apartments, all within 20 minutes of Ethan's daycare. Price range, $1,200 to $1,500 a month. One of them was starred. Connor had bookmarked it 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. 3 weeks ago, we'd gone to my parents' house for the weekend. Connor played with Ethan in the backyard, helped Mom with the barbecue, and Dad told me, "You got lucky with him, Rachel. You got lucky." The water in the bathroom turned off. I put the iPad back, face down, just as it was. When Connor came out in a towel, I was sitting on the couch with a book. Ethan fell right asleep, he said, wore himself out at the park. Great, I said. My voice was even. I surprised myself. Want to watch something? Sure, we watched some show. He put his hand on my knee. I didn't move it. For 2 hours, I sat next to a man who was browsing apartments for his new life, and I pretended everything was fine. It turned out to be easy. That's what truly scared me. Tuesday, 9:30 in the morning. Connor texted that he dropped Ethan at daycare and would work from a coffee shop, need a change of scenery. I looked at the message and thought, I wonder if he's already called the Uber or if he's still finishing his coffee before heading to Maple Ridge. I replied, "Have a good day," and added a yellow heart like I did every morning. Not a red one, that would be too much, not our style. Yellow, warm, light, non-committal, 6 years of yellow hearts. I wondered if he sent Vanessa red ones. At the office, I closed the door and sat down at my work laptop. I went to iCloud through the browser. I knew his login, we'd set it up together. The password, I tried Ethan's birthday. Didn't work. Tried our address with the wedding year. Didn't work. Tried Donovan 2019, the year his mother died. It worked. He'd protected his second life with a password made from his mother's maiden name and the year she died. I didn't know what to do with that, be angry or feel sorry for him. Be angry. Definitely be angry. Through iCloud, I got access to his notes. And that's where the spreadsheet stopped being a spreadsheet. In the notes, there was a folder. No title, just a creation date last May. Inside, 12 notes. I opened them in order, and each one was worse than the last. In one, a list of things to move out. His clothes, work equipment, 3 paintings from his studio. Not our shared things, only his. In another, a calculation of monthly expenses for one person. Rent, food, transportation, health insurance. The total was underlined, $2,800 a month. In the next, a schedule of freelance projects for the coming 6 months, with notes on which were confirmed and which were still in negotiation. He was building a pipeline, securing his income. I read note after note, and it felt like looking in a mirror. Because this was what I do every day. Analysis, planning, strategy. My husband, whom I'd thought of as creative and a little out of touch with the real world, was building an exit strategy with a precision I would have commended in an intern. But the longest note was about timing. September, Ethan starts pre-K, full days. Rachel adjusts to new schedule in 2 to 3 weeks. By October, stable rhythm. Best time for the conversation. A weeknight after Ethan is asleep. Not Friday, Rachel has hard days on Fridays, she's irritable. Wednesday or Thursday. He didn't write our names in full, just initials, E and R like variables in an equation. My son and I reduced to first letters in his escape plan. He had scheduled the day he would leave me, not an exact date, a window, Wednesday or Thursday, October. After Ethan settled into his new school. After I adjusted to the new rhythm. He'd calculated when it would be most convenient for me to survive this, or when it would be most convenient for him to do it. I'm not sure there's a difference. Further along, copied fragments of his conversations with Vanessa. She wrote, "Are you sure about the fall?" He replied, "Yes, I can't do it sooner, it wouldn't be fair to Ethan." She wrote, "And is it fair to me waiting another 6 months?" He replied, "I know, I'm sorry, soon. Not fair to Ethan. And to me, what? I didn't even figure into his moral equation. Not as a person who would be hurt, as a variable. R. Irritable on Fridays, better to do it on Wednesday." The last note had been updated 2 weeks ago. One line, signed application for apartment on Birch Street. Move in September 1st. Not Zillow, not browsing. Signed an application, 4 months. I had 4 months before my husband planned to inform me that our marriage was over, on a Wednesday or Thursday after Ethan fell asleep. I closed iCloud, closed the browser, closed the laptop, and for the first time in this entire process, through all those days of spreadsheets, screenshots, and patterns, I didn't know what to do next. The analyst in me had run out. All that was left was a woman whose husband had planned his departure with the same precision she used to plan investment portfolios. Ironic, isn't it? We were finally alike. 2 weeks. I gave myself 2 weeks. Not because I didn't know what to do, I already knew. Lawyer, paperwork, conversation. But I needed something else. I needed to see. Not data in a spreadsheet, not screenshots of someone else's messages, but him. Alive. Lying to my face. I needed to fall out of love with him before I could divorce him. And for that, I needed to finally see what I'd spent 6 years refusing to notice. That's how my 2 weeks of observation began. Like at work, only the subject of analysis was my husband. Monday, day 1. Dinner. Connor was talking about finishing a logo for a startup, pleased with himself. Ethan was smearing mashed potatoes across the table. An ordinary evening. But I was watching differently now. The phone. Connor placed it face down like the iPad, always. During dinner, he checked it twice. Both times, a quick glance when I turned toward Ethan. I hadn't turned toward Ethan. I was watching from the corner of my eye. He read something, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Not a smile, the beginning of a smile that he killed. He put the phone back down, face down. "Someone from work?" I asked. "Spam," he said, and passed me the salt. "Spam that makes you want to smile." "Sure, Connor, Wednesday. I came home from work earlier than usual." Connor was in the kitchen, laptop open, coffee beside him. When I opened the door, he closed a tab. Quickly, not abruptly, practiced. A rehearsed movement. How many times had he rehearsed it? "Hey," he said, "you're early." Meeting got canceled. I watched his face. 1 second, a micro-calculation. I could see him scrolling through his head. What was on the screen? Did I close it in time? Did she notice? Half a second, then a smile. Cool. Want me to make pasta? Before, I only saw the smile. Now I saw the half second before it. Friday. He was more tender with Ethan. This hadn't started today, I just hadn't understood what it meant. Connor read to him before bed 20 minutes longer than usual. Lay beside him, held him, was in no rush to leave. I stood in the doorway of the nursery watching them, and something inside me cracked because I knew what this was. This wasn't good father. This was a man rehearsing a farewell. He was already getting used to the idea that soon he'd see his son every other weekend. He came out of the nursery and saw me in the hallway. "What is it?" he whispered, so as not to wake Ethan. "Nothing, just watching." The second week, I noticed things I used to chalk up to "that's just who he is." Connor never talked about the future more than a month ahead. I suggested booking a vacation for August. He said, "Let's see when it gets closer." I asked if he wanted to trade in his car. "Maybe, not right now." Mom invited us for Thanksgiving in November. He said, "Sounds good," in the tone people use for maybe about things that don't concern them. Because it didn't concern him. In November, he didn't plan to be here, and here's the strangest thing. He became more tender with me too, not just Ethan, me, hugging me from behind while I washed dishes, saying "you're beautiful" for no reason, just like that in the morning when I was still in an old t-shirt, kissing my forehead before bed. At first I thought guilt, the same story I'd read about in other people's marriages during sleepless nights on Google. The cheating partner compensates with affection. But then I understood. It wasn't guilt. It was also a farewell. He was saying goodbye to me, and I was standing right there, not supposed to know. Like attending a funeral you weren't invited to. He was mourning our marriage while still inside it, and in the morning, driving to Maple Ridge. You know what the worst part was? In those 2 weeks, I never once saw him angry, irritated, guilty. He wasn't suffering. He'd already let go. All that tenderness, the smiles, the "you're beautiful," this was a man who'd made his decision and was now letting himself enjoy the final months because the ending was already set. And I sat across from him and counted the days until his October Wednesday. On the 14th day, I woke at 5 in the morning. Connor was asleep. I lay there looking at him and realized, that's it. I'm no longer looking for evidence. I'm no longer observing. I now know this man better than he knows himself. And I no longer love him, not because he cheated, not because he lied, but because I spent 2 weeks looking into his eyes and saw a person who was comfortable, who was perfectly fine living like this, loving his child, leaving for another woman, kissing his wife goodnight, and never once flinching. I got up, made coffee, and opened my laptop. Googled, "Divorce attorney Boston high asset cases free consultation." Observation was over. Now the work began. The attorney's name was Patricia Thornton. I found her not through Google, through a colleague, Mark from the compliance department. I told him, I need someone who handles financially complex divorces. He didn't ask who for. Professionals don't ask. Patricia's office was on the 16th floor of a downtown business center. Glass, oak, carpet that cost more than my car. She herself was about 55, gray suit, short hair, not a single unnecessary object on her desk. I liked her immediately. A person who doesn't waste space. I sat down and placed a printout in front of her. 23 pages. "This is my husband," I said. "Everything I've found over the past month." Patricia put on her glasses and began reading. I sat in silence, watched her turn pages. Her expression didn't change until page 7, the one with the timeline from the iCloud notes. She paused there. "You accessed his iCloud?" "Yes, I knew the login." "Family plan, I set it up myself." "You knew the password or you guessed the password?" A pause. "Guessed, on the second try." Patricia took off her glasses. "Rachel, you've done brilliant work. I say that sincerely. In 22 years of practice, I've never seen a client come in with this level of preparation. But I need to be honest with you." I already knew what she was going to say. Somewhere inside, I'd known since the moment I guessed the password. "Everything you obtained through his iCloud, the notes, the messages, the plans, None of it is admissible in court. In our state, accessing someone else's account without explicit consent is a violation, even between spouses. Even with a shared family plan. If we try to use this, his attorney won't just block it, he'll flip the case. You'll go from the injured party to the offender. Silence. I looked at my 23 pages at the neat cells, the color coding, the arrows with dates, my best work. Useless. The bank records are a different matter, Patricia continued. The joint account is your shared account. You have every right to analyze each transaction. The Uber rides, the cash withdrawals, the date match subscription, all of that we can use. We file for financial discovery, and through the court we'll obtain data on his hidden account, the rental, and any assets he's concealing. Legally, cleanly, irrefutably. How long will that take? Filing within a week if you're ready. The court order 4 to 6 weeks for full disclosure, but a preliminary hearing can be scheduled sooner. I did the math in my head, a week to file plus 6 weeks. Late June, early July. His October would never come. There's one more thing, Patricia said, and it's more important than the documents. She folded her hands in front of her. You're the mother of a 4-year-old child. You're the primary earner. You're stable, employed, competent. He's a freelancer with unstable income who's been leading a double life. On the question of custody, your position is unassailable, but only if you don't make mistakes between now and the filing. What kind of mistakes? Don't confront him. Don't let on that you know. Don't touch his devices again at all. Don't move money, don't change the locks, don't pack his things, be yourself, the Rachel who sends yellow hearts. She couldn't have known about the yellow hearts. It was a coincidence, but my throat tightened. Can you do that? A few weeks, be normal? I almost laughed. I'd watched him for 2 weeks like a lab subject and he'd noticed nothing. I could be normal as long as necessary. Yes, I said, I can. Good. Patricia pulled a yellow legal pad toward her. Then let's begin. Tell me about your shared assets, everything. The house, accounts, insurance, retirement savings. You're an analyst, I take it? Yes. Excellent. Then you'll get through this part faster than I would. She smiled. For the first time in a month, I felt something close to control. We worked for an hour and a half. I listed everything we had. The house, the mortgage was in my name. He was just a cosigner. 2 cars. My retirement account, his nearly empty. Our joint savings, $47,000. And his freelance income, part of which he'd been siphoning into cash. Patricia wrote it down, asked clarifying questions, nodded occasionally. At the end, she put down her pen. Rachel, I'm going to ask you a question I ask every client. Think before you answer. I nodded. What do you want? Not legally, personally. What do you want from this divorce? I thought I knew the answer. Justice, or revenge, or for him to feel even a fraction of what I was feeling. But when I opened my mouth, something else came out. I want him to find out first. Not from a lawyer, not from papers. I want to see his face when he realizes that I knew, this whole time, and he didn't even notice. Patricia looked at me for a long moment. That can be arranged, she said, but after the filing, not before. After the filing, agreed. I left her office at 12:30. In the parking lot in my car, I sat for 5 minutes gripping the steering wheel. Didn't cry. I still hadn't cried once through all of this, and that should probably worry me, but it doesn't. Tears are a reaction to surprise, and I had already survived the surprise. Now I was in the execution phase. I took out my phone, called Connor. Hey, he said, background noise of a coffee shop, or not a coffee shop, it didn't matter anymore. Hi, are you picking up Ethan today? My meeting ran long. Of course, everything okay? Everything's fine, just work. Okay. Love you? A pause, short enough that he wouldn't notice. You too. I hung up and pulled out of the parking lot. The sun was in my eyes through the rearview mirror. I put on my sunglasses and thought, That phrase, love you, takes less than a second to say. 2 words. I wondered how many of those seconds over 6 years had been real. And then I thought, it doesn't matter. I have Patricia Thornton, 23 pages of data, and 4 months until his October Wednesday. He wouldn't need more than 2. The next 3 weeks were the most ordinary weeks of my life. At least that's how it looked from the outside. I went to work, sent yellow hearts, signed documents in Patricia's office. And on Thursday, May 14th, she called and said, filed, 5 to 7 business days, that's not long when you're busy. And I was busy. At work, the quarterly report for a major client. At home, Ethan, who was getting ready for the spring show at daycare and every evening rehearsed a song about butterflies, mixing up half the words. Connor helped him, sitting on the living room floor, clapping on the chorus. Good father, rehearsing his goodbye. I sent yellow hearts, made dinner on Wednesdays, laughed when I was supposed to laugh, went to Patricia's office once to sign additional financial discovery documents. Everything was on track. On the 6th business day, a Wednesday, I woke up with the feeling that today was the day. No logical basis. I just knew, the way you sometimes know rain is coming before you see the clouds. I left for work as usual, kissed Ethan, told Connor, see you tonight. All as usual. At work I couldn't concentrate. Opened files and stared at them without seeing numbers. This had never happened to me in 10 years. My brain, my reliable, precise, analytical brain, refused to function. Instead of pivot tables, it was running scenarios. How Connor would open the envelope. What he'd say. What would be on his face. I had rehearsed this scene dozens of times. In the car, in the shower, before bed while he slept beside me, I knew what I'd say. Calmly, evenly, factually. I know about Vanessa. I know about the apartment. I know about Maple Ridge, about date match, about September. I know everything, Connor, and I've known for a long time. Cold, clean. The final line item in the spreadsheet. I left the office at 4, an hour earlier than usual. The whole drive home my palms were sweating. My palms. I'd given dozens of presentations to investors worth millions of dollars, and my palms had never sweated. I parked at the house and saw Connor's car in the driveway. So he'd picked up Ethan, they were home. A normal evening. I opened the door and immediately knew, not normal. Silence. Not the silence of everyone doing their own thing. A different kind. Heavy, like before a storm. Ethan wasn't running through the hallway. The television was off. No water running in the kitchen, no clink of dishes. I set down my bag, took off my shoes, walked into the kitchen. Connor was sitting at the table. In front of him, an opened envelope. The papers laid out neatly in order, all 4 pages. He wasn't reading them, he'd already read them. He was looking out the window. Hands on the table, palms down, motionless. Where's Ethan? The first thing I said. At Martha's, I called her, asked her to pick him up. Martha was our neighbor. She helped with Ethan sometimes. So Connor had read it, understood, and the first thing he did was get the child out of the house. So he wouldn't hear. That was the only right thing he'd done in the past year. I stood in the kitchen doorway. He stared out the window. Between us, the table, 4 pages and 6 years that turned out to be something other than what I'd thought. Then he turned to me. I'd been waiting for something specific on his face. Shock, anger, fear, maybe shame. I'd replayed this moment so many times that I had 20 versions of his reaction, and a planned response for each. I didn't have a plan for what I saw. Relief. He looked like a man who had finally exhaled. You knew, he said. Not a question, a statement. Quiet, almost gentle. And in that moment, my entire plan, the calm speech, the facts, the cold list of his betrayals, all of it vanished. Because I had prepared for his pain, for conflict, for shouting or excuses. I hadn't prepared for it making him feel better. How long? He asked. 2 months. He nodded, slowly, as if that made sense. As if 2 months of silence were a logical, proper response. Why didn't you say anything? And then I laughed, not bitterly, not hysterically. Short, dry, like a cough. And you? 14 months, Connor, why didn't you? He lowered his eyes to the papers. I was going to, in October. On a Wednesday or Thursday, after Ethan fell asleep. Not Friday, I have hard days on Fridays. He went white. It was the first real expression on his face in the entire conversation. Not relief, not calm, fear. Pure animal fear of a person who realizes he's been seen, completely, through and through. How did you? I'm an analyst, Connor. It's my job finding what people hide in numbers. Silence. Long. So long I could hear the refrigerator humming. Rachel, he said at last, I don't. I need to explain. No, you don't. I walked to the table, pulled out a chair, sat down across from him, calmly, evenly, like in a negotiation. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to sign. We're going to do this civilly because we have a child who is 4 years old and who is singing a song about butterflies at his first recital in 2 weeks. And he will sing that song, and we will both sit in the audience and smile and clap. Because that is the one thing neither of us has the right to get wrong. Connor stared at me. I don't know what he saw. Maybe, for the first time, the real me. I'm not going to take Ethan away from you, I continued. You're a good father. It's the only thing you didn't lie about. Custody, joint, 50-50 if you don't fight the rest. Fight what the rest? The house goes to me. The mortgage is in my name, you know that. Your car stays yours. Savings split down the middle. Your hidden account, I know the amount. My attorney will get the exact figures through financial discovery. He flinched. How do you know about? Connor. I looked him in the eye. I know everything. Maple Ridge. Vanessa. 14 months. 4 women on date match. The apartment on Birch Street, move in September 1st. The notes in your iCloud, all 12 of them. The list of things to move, the expense calculations, the project pipeline. I know you estimated your monthly costs at $2,800. I'd say you underestimated. With inflation, at least $3,200. He sat motionless, completely motionless, like a file that had stopped loading. I stood up. Patricia Thornton, my attorney, will be in touch with you or your attorney within the week. If you don't have one, find one. Don't cut corners on that, Connor, because I won't. I walked out of the kitchen, went upstairs, entered the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the floor. Just sat, leaning against the bed we'd shared for 6 years. And finally, I cried. Not from pain, not from anger, from exhaustion. 2 months I'd been a machine. 2 months of spreadsheets, screenshots, observations, pretending, yellow hearts. 2 months I held it all inside because data first, emotions later. Later had arrived. 2 weeks is a long time when you're living in the same house as the person you filed for divorce from. Connor moved to the guest room that same evening. No discussion, he just carried his pillow and blanket while I was putting Ethan to bed. When I came out of the nursery, the guest room door was closed. Behind it, silence. No footsteps, no television, no phone call to Vanessa. Maybe he was also sitting on the floor, staring at the wall. Maybe not. I didn't check. We built a system. Quickly, silently, like 2 people who know how to plan. In the morning, he made Ethan breakfast. I packed the backpack. He drove to daycare. I picked up. In the evening, we crossed paths in the kitchen, exchanged information. He has a doctor's appointment at 10 tomorrow. The form for the recital needs to be picked up Friday, and went our separate ways. Ethan didn't notice. Or maybe he noticed but didn't say anything. 4 years old is the age when you feel everything but can't name any of it. He started asking to sleep in my bed more often. I let him. At work I functioned. The quarterly report went in on time. The client was happy. Mark from compliance asked if everything was all right. I said, "Everything's great." He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. Professionals. Patricia sent an update. Connor had hired an attorney, a Jeffrey Bloom. Not the most expensive, not the cheapest. Middle of the road. Like everything Connor did when it came to money, right in the center, so as not to attract attention. Financial discovery was underway. In 2 to 3 weeks, we'd have the data on the hidden account. In the meantime, we wait, and go to the recital. Friday, May 29th. Spring show at Ethan's daycare, 10:30 in the morning. I took the day off. Connor, as a freelancer, was free by definition. We drove in 2 cars. You know what nobody tells you about divorce? That the hardest moments aren't the confrontation or the court or dividing property. The hardest moments are when you have to sit beside the person you've fallen out of love with and pretend to be a family. Because the little person on stage believes that you are one. The room was a standard daycare hall, chairs set up in rows. Drawings on the walls, balloons, the smell of disinfectant and homemade baked goods. 25 parents, half of them with phones at the ready. The teacher, Mrs. Hernandez, was more nervous than the kids. I sat in the 3rd row. Connor came up a minute later, sat down next to me, not right next to me, 1 chair between us. Then he looked at that empty chair and moved closer. I didn't shift away. "Nervous for him?" he asked quietly. "He's going to mix up the words," I said. "Of course he will." Yesterday he was rehearsing, and instead of butterfly, he sang butterfrog. I smiled. Didn't want to, just smiled. Muscle memory. 6 years of laughing together at the same things doesn't erase in 2 weeks. The kids came out. 15 small humans in homemade costumes of colored paper and glue. Butterflies, flowers, 1 ladybug, 1 unidentifiable bug, Timmy from Ethan's group, I think, who always went his own way. Ethan stood in the 2nd row, 3rd from the left. Butterfly wings made of cardboard, painted blue and orange. He'd chosen the colors himself, I remember him explaining. Blue because sky and orange because pretty. The logic of a 4-year-old, flawless. The music started, something simple on a piano. The children began to sing. Ethan sang louder than anyone. Not because he had a good voice. He has a terrible voice, honestly, and that's from Connor, not from me. He sang loud because he's 4 years old and lives in a world where everything is done at full volume. Run, then run. Eat, then smear mashed potatoes across the whole table. Sing so they can hear you in the hallway. Butterfly, butterfly, fly so high. He got it wrong. Of course he did. Instead of touch the sky, he sang touch the. Forgot the word, froze for a second, then just started waving his arms as though that was the choreography all along. The girl next to him laughed. He laughed back, picked up the next line and kept going like nothing had happened. Tears came, not like 2 weeks before on the bedroom floor. Quietly. They just came, I didn't even notice at first. I watched my son, who forgot a word and filled the gap with a wave of his arms, and I thought, there it is. That's what everything else doesn't matter for. Not the spreadsheet. Not Vanessa. Not the apartment on Birch Street. This small person in cardboard wings who doesn't know his parents are getting divorced. Who in 6 months will be adjusting to 2 houses, 2 bedrooms, 2 lives? Who will ask why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore? Connor beside me was crying too. I didn't look at him, saw it from the corner of my eye. He wasn't wiping the tears. They just ran down his face, and he watched Ethan with an expression I had never seen on him in 6 years. This was the real goodbye. Not the tender "you're beautiful" in the morning. Not the extra-long bedtime stories. This, silent, in a room with balloons and the smell of disinfectant, watching a child whose 1 wing had come unglued and was hanging by a strip of tape. The song ended. The children bowed. The room applauded. Ethan searched for us with his eyes, found us, and his face. I will remember that face until my last day lit up. He waved at us. Did you see? Did you see me sing? We both waved back. At the same time, in sync, like a team. A team. I used to be proud of that word. After the recital, the kids ate cupcakes in the playroom. Parents stood in clusters, drinking coffee from plastic cups. Connor and I stood next to each other. Not together, next to each other. The difference was obvious only to me. One of the moms, Sandra, we chatted sometimes at drop-off, walked over. Ethan was amazing. You must be so proud. Very, I said. He mixed up the words but recovered so beautifully, Sandra laughed. You have a wonderful family. I felt Connor freeze beside me, a micro pause, half a second. That same half second I had learned to see during my 2 weeks of watching. Thanks, Sandra, I said. We try, Sandra left. We stood in silence. Rachel, Connor said, not looking at me, not here. I know, not here, but later. I need to tell you something. Later, we picked up Ethan. He ran to the car, swinging his backpack and what remained of a cardboard wing. Mom, Dad, I sang, did you hear? I forgot one word, but I did this. And he waved his arms exactly like he had on stage. Mrs. Hernandez said it was creative. Creative, Connor corrected gently. Yeah, creative. That means cool, right? That means cool, Connor said, and his voice cracked on the last word, just barely. Ethan didn't notice. I did. We stood in the daycare parking lot. Sunshine, late May, a warm breeze. My son bounced between us, grabbing one hand then the other, telling us about Timmy's ladybug costume that wasn't real but was still beautiful. And I thought, here it is. The moment, not the one I planned. Not the confrontation at the kitchen table, not the recitation of facts, not the cold precision of my 23 pages. This one, a parking lot. Sunshine, a child with a broken wing. 2 adults who couldn't make it work, but were trying not to destroy the one thing they'd gotten right. 6 months. 182 days, I counted, of course. You see, I still count. Some habits don't go away. The divorce was finalized in September. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very month Connor had planned to move into the apartment on Birch Street. He did move there, just not the way he'd imagined. Not after a carefully planned conversation on a Wednesday or Thursday. But after 3 months of legal proceedings, a financial discovery that uncovered his hidden account. $11,400. I'd been close in my estimate, and 2 mediation sessions where we divided belongings, time with Ethan, and the remains of what had once been a shared life. Connor didn't fight. Patricia said this was unusual, that normally the other side contests at least something, on principle, out of anger, out of fear. Connor signed everything. The house, mine, custody 50-50, as I'd proposed. Savings split evenly. His hidden account went back into the common pool and was divided. At the last mediation session, he looked at me across the table and said, "You were right about everything." I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't. When a person who lied to you for 14 months says you were right, it doesn't bring satisfaction. They're just words. Like love you, 2 words, less than a second, and you never know which ones were real. Vanessa disappeared. I don't know if she left on her own or Connor ended it. I didn't ask. None of my business. What Patricia told me from the discovery results was enough. Vanessa lived in Connecticut. They'd met in person 4 times over 8 months, and the rest was messages and phone calls. His grand parallel life was, essentially, text messages and a fantasy. $11,000 and a rented apartment for a life that mostly existed on a phone screen. That should have made it easier. It didn't. Ethan was the hardest part. The first 2 weeks after Connor moved out, Ethan asked every morning, "Is Daddy coming today?" I answered, "Daddy lives in another house now, remember. You'll be at his place on Friday. Ethan would nod, and then the next morning he'd ask again. 4-year-olds don't understand the permanence of change. For them, every morning is a new world where everything might have gone back to the way it was. In the third week, he stopped asking. I don't know what's worse, when he asked or when he stopped. Now, in November, we have a rhythm. Weekdays, Ethan is with me. Weekends, we alternate, one with me, the next with Connor. Ethan carries a little backpack with his pajamas and a stuffed dinosaur back and forth. He stopped mixing up which house has which toys. He's learned. Children learn faster than we deserve. Connor picks him up on Friday at 5 sharp. We cross paths on the doorstep. Exchange information. He barely ate dinner last night. He was coughing this morning. I gave him syrup. Sometimes Ethan hugs us both at once, one arm around each, and it lasts about 3 seconds, and those are the longest 3 seconds of my week. Connor looks tired, thinner, paler. The apartment on Birch Street, according to Ethan, is small, but Daddy has a drawing table and we make store pizza. Ethan says this without complaint. For him, store pizza is an adventure. Children have a low threshold for happiness. It saves them. Work. At work, I got the project I'd been dreaming about for 2 years, portfolio analysis for the state pension fund. Big, complex, prestigious. Mark from compliance shook my hand and said, "Well deserved." I thought, funny, the last person who used that word with me was Connor the evening of my promotion. A week before he registered on Date Match. Words are funny things. The same word in different mouths means completely different things. Last night, a Thursday, after Ethan fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table. The same one. The one where Connor had sat with the envelope. The one where we'd eaten dinners for 6 years, where Ethan smeared mashed potatoes, where I once checked students' homework in another life, when I was still a teacher. The table outlived us all. I opened my laptop, not for work. Just opened it, and in my documents folder I saw the file. The household review, my spreadsheet, that same one. 700 rows of transactions, yellow cells, red cells, the Date Match subscription for $9.99. Uber rides to Maple Ridge, each about $20 and change. The cash withdrawal curve with its inflection point in May. All neat, all color-coded, all perfect. I opened it. I don't know why, maybe to make sure it was real. That I hadn't imagined it. The numbers were all there. Even columns, formulas, dates, my best work, my worst work. I stared at it for about 5 minutes. Then I closed it. Then I opened it again. Selected everything. All 700 rows turned blue. Delete. An empty file, a white screen, nothing. I closed it. Save changes? Yes. Save the emptiness. That's data too. Then I got up, washed my mug, turned off the kitchen light, and went upstairs. In the nursery, Ethan was sleeping spread out like a starfish, his blanket on the floor. I picked it up and covered him. He mumbled something in his sleep, not a word, just a sound. Warm, soft, completely meaningless, and completely enough. I stood in the doorway of his room and thought, you know what doesn't fit in a spreadsheet? This sound. This small person who in 20 years might ask me, "Mom, what happened with Dad?" And I'll tell him the truth, not all of it enough. Because some data is for analysis and some is for deleting. There are 2 types of people, those who check their bank statements and those who trust. I was both. I paid for both. But right now, in November, in an empty house, with an empty spreadsheet and a sleeping child on the other side of the wall, I think I'm becoming a third type. The kind who knows when to count and when to close the file. It cost me 1 marriage, $11,400 in hidden assets, and 14 months of someone else's lies. By my calculations, cheap.